Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Well, today we are starting a new series, and given the climate, that we're in, it looks like we're going to be needing a lot of recovery and restoration, which is the name of our series. We have always needed it. We have always used it, whether we were conscious of it or not. But what this series really is focusing on is when it is that our lives break down. And so I have the privilege of beginning this series today, and I've decided to just start at the beginning, which is when things fall apart, when your life hits a brick wall, when everything that you thought you knew is brought into question. When a tragedy occurs, or an event, or a loss, or an addiction finally comes to some kind of crisis, whether it's yours or a loved one's, you are involved, you're part of it. September 1985, I had been married for 4 months. In those 4 months, I had been on sort of a roller coaster with my husband, because in September 1985, I was standing there and aware that my husband, who was now in inpatient treatment for chemical dependency, was an addict, and I was just coming to terms with understanding what a codependent was. Somebody actually had to write it on a board and explain it to me. But I was still confused about my part in his drug use. I was the good one. I was the one who followed the rules. I did everything right. I was an A student. I had a career. I had everything going for me. I really didn't understand how I got here. And now I'm in therapy with him as a codependent. It was an amazing program, a once-in-a-lifetime program that was paid for by the hospital that he was taking drugs from and using. That was part of his recovery, an 18-week program. But it enabled me to learn what my part was in that drug use. And of course it stemmed from the alcoholism of my father and the ways in which I had lived in that and not been conscious of all the ways I was affected. So I was in therapy, and I was in 12-step groups, and the therapy required that I be there in the evening, so I got permission from my boss. It meant I had to tell them about it, and ask for time away for a couple of hours wearing a beeper, a pager, so that I could still do my duties as necessary. Oh, did I mention I was pregnant? I'm 30 years old, and I've known William less than a year. And I don't know how I got here. And all I'm feeling is guilt and shame and stupid. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do or what the next steps are. And I'll have to say that as I think back over that time, I know that I was walking around shell-shocked. I did the next right thing. I did the next thing I needed to do. I pretended like everything was fine. If people knew about it, I would share more honestly. If they didn't know about it, everything's great. He's working someplace else. Let's, look at the bird, like I changed the subject. Because I didn't know how else to handle it. And so as that work started to move in me, I came to understand something else about the program and about how it is that we shift and change. I became part of a 12-step group, and in my Catholicism, I was told as part of this training, part of this recovery work that I was in, that in fact 12-step recovery group attendance was part of it. It was a spiritual program, they told me, and I said, oh, that's okay, I have Mass. I go to Mass every Sunday. I'm a good Catholic. I don't need a spiritual program. I got one, right? And they required me to go. So I go into these dark basement rooms, old carpet, old chairs, the worst coffee you will ever drink. It was made yesterday, and it's been heating up waiting for you. But I poured me some just so I had something to do and something to hold, because I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I didn't know why I was there. And so I came to understand that in these rooms, and over time, and over some of the awareness and some of the healing that came through me in my therapy work, group therapy, but also in these 12-step groups, I began to realize that there was the power of the Holy Spirit there that I only felt in Mass a few times, at various times. But consistently I began to feel it in these rooms, where someone could walk in cold to that room and not even know how the meeting was supposed to go. And after a certain point, I would start to get frustrated with that. Oh, somebody just take her outside and tell her how we do this. Stop raising her hand. She's not supposed to do that. Thinking back on how many times I probably tried to do the same thing. And in all of that, I began to realize that that person that I was judging would come out and share some piece of truth, some piece of honesty, some piece of wisdom that would just tumble out of their mouth, which was the very thing I needed to hear that day. And I had nothing else to say or to offer. I was so humbled. The Holy Spirit is at work there. That recovery enabled me to be standing before you today. Because needless to say, I'm not in the Catholic Church any longer, but I'm not really mad at it, except for some of the things it does to other people. But what I really want you to know is that it's because of the work and the healing that happened there that I'm able to be with you today. And I tell you that not because I assume everybody's got chemical addiction in their life or that they're codependent necessarily. I will tell you that I do think there's a 12-step group for everybody, that you just have to find your membership card, and you will find a room full of friends and family you did not know existed. And it doesn't matter where you go, you will find more of them. So that's one thing. But I will tell you that I believe that the elements of recovery are also part of every healing process that we have, honestly. We have shock, we have anger, we have despair, we have fear, we have guilt, we have shame. All of those things we go through whenever something has fallen apart, when the plates don't spin, when the balls drop, when something comes crashing into our world and destroys everything we expected or what we thought the way life was supposed to be. Our worldview gets shattered. The things we knew for sure are now in question. And when we go through that, there is a sense of being alone and a sense of not knowing which way to turn. Mary Oliver said, "Someone I love once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to realize the gift that it was." It's interesting to know that as we are facing these kinds of tragedies and crises that we wouldn't wish on anybody, that our friends are so grateful didn't happen to them, that they come to our side and give us their support, but don't want to hear about it a week later because it reminds them of how close they came. This is the nature sometimes of the journey of going alone in this transformation and healing process. But the process is the same because we will come to a new identity of self, a new identity, a new way of understanding our purpose, our spirituality, the way the world really works, and we didn't know. When something happens, the choice becomes ours to decide how we respond to it. We can use some of the same old things we've done before, but it's usually calling for a whole new set of tools that we haven't yet developed. The choice becomes our willingness to have the courage to step into places and to ask for support and help. There's a difference between those who recover and heal and those who remain wounded or using or lost or hurting. I don't pretend to know exactly how that happens, but what I do know is that seems to be a deep little, my theory, this is my working theory, there's a little toggle switch buried deep inside of us. And that no matter how much lip service we give to what our recovery might be and what we might do and what we're willing to do or be, in the moment, are we willing to flip the switch and to let go, to give up, to give in, and to let something greater than us have its way and show us the way? It happens sometimes in a moment of transformative healing and insight, and for many of us, it happens over a long series of steps that we take, that we walk through, doors we open that we thought we would never have to go through, don't think we should have to go through, are angry that they're ours to do, and yet we do it because there's nothing else around us that shows us any light. This is the way, and we have to go. Jet Sfera says, a part of us has to die to transform. And a part of us dies if we don't. So do we have a choice? It's only up to us which one of those scenarios will prevail. There was a young woman who tells her story. She says, it was my first visit home from college since I got sober a few months earlier, and I was a jumble of emotions. It was comforting to be back in my old room among the posters, books, and stuffed animals of my childhood. But this familiar landscape also brought back painful memories as well, like the time I was too hungover and queasy to enjoy the Thanksgiving meal my mom had prepared. Or the time I got drunk at a high school football game and ran onto the field during halftime. In finding the strength to stay sober, I had found a new relationship with God. My faith deepened every time I met the challenges of the day without needing to have a drink. But this newfound trust in God still seemed like a narrow, rickety bridge over the deep chasm of my difficulties. It was prone to rock and groan with the slightest breeze. The light breeze of sadness that I felt upon my return home was now quickly turning into a gale of self-pity and anger. I lay on my back, alone on the top bunk of the bed I shared with my sister, and burned with envy for normal folks. God, how come I had to be an alcoholic? No one else in my family has this problem. Why do I have to be the one to have this terrible lifelong affliction? And then the answer came. It boomed in my head and whispered in my heart at the same time. It said, because it brought you here. And the voice vanished quick as a clap. I lay there in bed for a long time, eyes wide, heart pounding. Here I was in my childhood bedroom, 3 months sober, lying on my old bed and talking to God, seeking God like I hadn't in years. And God came. Though my story involves chemical dependency and codependency, spiritual awakening happens in the similar ways. It can come as a catastrophic health challenge. It can come, as I said, a rude awakening in a loved one's life, a loss, a death, a change that wasn't anticipated or planned or welcomed, something that derails everything we thought we understood, not only about ourselves, but about where we were going, what our lives ought to be, what they ought to be like. Who are we in relation to everything else? And maybe even, what is God? And where is God's place in my life? All of these big, huge questions can stop us in our tracks. And yes, we can pick up the shards and we can try to glue them back together and paper the wall back up. We can try to go a little further down the road with the ideas that brought us this far, with the things we were taught so far about the world. But it won't be long before an even bigger sort of catastrophe can happen, because our souls have called us out, because our souls have asked for something new to happen. We call this in recovery hitting bottom. We call it in spirituality a dark night of the soul. But whatever we call it, the same steps are necessary. The same ways of truth-telling and learning and listening and learning how to love, really love, not just platitudes, but a spaciousness of the heart. We learn how to forgive ourselves, the hardest culprit in our lives for most of us, and others, and all of life, and find out that forgiveness really is just two words: letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. It takes courage. And a Jewish mystic, Baal Shem Tov, said this: "Let me fall if I must, so that the one I will become will catch me." I'm so glad you like that. I love it. Because it speaks so beautifully to this continuity and to the power of our souls and to the ways in which we become more just at the very moment we feel so lost and we feel so small. This is what happens when things fall apart. This is what happens, and the questions and the choices that are before us. So what do? Here's my greatest piece of advice to you, is you get help. You cannot do this by yourself. I'll tell you why. Because by yourself, you got here. If you're so smart, you wouldn't be in that place. If I knew what I didn't know, I would have, who knows what I would have been doing. But I give thanks every single day that I have married the man I have married, who had the good wisdom to invite me into his life, and the ways in which we have grown together over the years. He's been sober over 34 years. It's clean and sober. We'll celebrate your birthday right now. But that's just a small part of him. The man he has become and the growth that he has developed because he's continued his process is amazing to me, and it humbles me. The ways in which we can grow together when we are facing things, we have a similar history and language. We didn't have a year into our marriage. We had to learn it and develop it. So if you get help, I'm going to invite you to look for a 12-step recovery, because it supported me in letting go of guilt and shame, making amends. I had no idea what that was about. Meeting people in recovery like myself, learning compassion and finding peace. Professional help. Think about this. If I've suggested sometimes to people that I think could use a good therapist, because everybody could use a friend you buy, right? A friend that you pay, right? A friend that gets to know every single thing about you. But that's not the way to think of them at all. You think about somebody who's devoted their life to learning the skills to help broken hearts heal and damaged lives to become whole. Don't you want to know at least one of those people? Don't you want to know what they know and get their support? It is worth it. It has changed my life. As I said, I'm here today because of that. And 12-step also has helped me over all of that time. As you think about that, Terry Patton also says, in truth, the heart must crack open if the soul is to become free. You were destined for that breakdown. You were destined for that crash because something in you wanted to grow. And the only way to do it is wholesale broken open. And Terry goes on. If the soul is to become free, the heart must crack open, and you simply cannot think your way into that, which is why you need someone else to take you by the hand. Parker Palmer says, wholeness does not mean perfection, it means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. And so just know that some of your resistance may be somebody's going to talk to me and tell me what I did wrong, or it's going to tell me what I ought to do or try to run my life. I've talked to some of those people before, and they just are all over this and want to tell me everything. I'm going to tell you that in my experience of 12-step, for instance, walking into those rooms, that nobody is going to tell you what to do, and they're not going to redirect you unless you ask for their advice. But they will lay their lives open, and they will talk about the tenderest and most painful times in their lives, and then share with you their experience, strength, and hope today as a result. And they'll offer, in their words, your opportunity to take what you like and leave the rest. That I can promise you. L.R. Nost says this: do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go. Love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. Please, if you think there's something that you might need to take a look at, something back in the past that maybe you didn't fully deal with, or something you've never told anyone, maybe today's the day that you open your world and allow yourself to step through a door you've never done before. It will make all the difference, and the world awaits you. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.